within high control relational systems tends to have certain unique characteristics and functions. And in today's video, I'm going to talk about what they are. For those of you who are new here, my name is Dr. Felucia, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And on this channel, I talk about high control relational systems. It's a term that I've developed to help you understand and conceptualize the types of systems. They can be relationships, institutions, whatever the case may be, that function in a certain way that allows manipulation, toxic behavior, and even covert psychological abuse to occur. So back to the question or the topic at hand. Characteristics of criticism within these high control relational systems. So when you think about criticism is going to look different ways depending on where you are. Within this particular system, you'll notice that the criticism tends to be irrelevant. Remember what I talk about: context, nuance, and patterns. Pay attention to those three things with regard to the behavior that I'm talking about. Irrelevant criticism. What does that look like? Think about the last time you got criticism about something that was not relevant at all, right? That is what you'll see within the high control relational system. So what would that actually look like? Maybe, basically it's whatever irrelevant means in that situation. It could be tangentially related to what a job task is if you're in the workplace. If it's within like a relationship or family, it could be something that has really nothing to do with what the issue is at hand. It could be things about clothing or preferences, not related to the actual issue at hand. So irrelevant, that's the first thing. And these all begin with the letter I. The second one that is probably the most difficult for people within the system is inconsistent criticism. When I talk about a consistency, it can look a few ways. One of the easiest things to sort of pick apart is the double standard, meaning that you're criticized for something and somebody else is not, right? And so when we talk about people who are on the receiving end of tactics like the high control system likes to use, things like humiliation rituals and shunning and, just things that exert social control, you will see double standards. The person who's on the receiving end of this oftentimes is treated by a different set of rules and standards. And so you will see that with criticism. You and someone can do the same thing. Usually it won't be identical, right? And so that's what these systems will use to justify their behavior. But you will know when you see inconsistent criticism. So there's that in the form of double standards, but there also can be inconsistent criticism with regard to standards in general, right? So this often looks like you being criticized for something, and then when you correct it, you're also criticized for it. I'll give you a common example that many of you have talked about before. For instance, in the place of work, many of you, we always joke on my channel here about the we're all family sort of thing, right? That high control systems often use to try and rush or force intimacy or create a sense of intimacy that's inappropriate to the environment or is used to manipulate and control. And so when you're in that type of environment, especially a workplace, you're there to just get your work done and go home or log off. You may have been given criticism that you're not social enough. You're not a team player. You need to share more about your life, whatever the case may be. You get that criticism, and so you try to open up more. You may share a little bit about your life. You may try to interact more, and then you get the feedback. Well, you're really making people here feel really uncomfortable. And, at work, we really try to make sure that we, keep our professional and private life separate. And so you're thinking, wait, first, I'm being told that I'm not social or engaging enough. And then now I am, and I'm getting criticized for that. Okay. What that functions to do is to create instability. It's destabilizing because you're not expecting that. When people have when the high control relational system uses inconsistent standards, what they're basically telling you is that you can't really prove anything. You can't get us, right? Because if you have different sets of rules, then what rule are you going to point out and say, hey, you guys violated this rule? If you think about double standards, for instance, right? You may bring that to the attention of the system and they'll say, well, we're privy to things that you don't know about. And the problem is that the things that they're saying may have an element of truth to it. You probably are not privy to things that they know, but that still does not excuse a pattern of inconsistent standards that are supposed to be equally applied, right? And even with yourself, with the whole inconsistent standards within your own behavior. If you were to call that out and say, hey, well, look, you guys told me you wanted me to interact more with people. I'm doing that, and now I'm getting feedback that that's wrong. What would you like me to do? Or what was the problem? They won't tell you. Or if they do, it's going to be very vague. Well, we don't really know. It could be you're just, whatever it is, right? And so you're hearing this and you're like, I still don't have any information. And that functions to destabilize you because if the system were to say, hey, this is what we expect and lay out the rules, then they could be called out on those rules, right? And so it functions to evade accountability and allow them to continue doing what they're doing. Another term that I have developed to help understand this framework of high control relational systems is plausibly deniable social control. Think about the two examples that I just gave: inconsistent standards between two people and inconsistent standards regarding your own behavior. When you call that out and when you ask for more clarification, there's always this element of plausible deniability. They might say something, give you an answer like, well, when they say things like, well, you're not privy to information that we have, or you don't know the whole story. That is a way of throwing rocks and hiding hands, right? You have to prove that what they did was wrong, right? Or not consistent. If there are no rules or consistent standards that you can point to, an objective standard, then they can just get away with it. Because they say, oh, you don't know about this. When it comes to the making people uncomfortable or not being social enough, I remember someone told me they asked the people, they said, well, where in my handbook does it say I have to be social? And they were told, well, this is just part of our culture. This is just what we do, right? And so that is a way of throwing rocks and hiding hands. It's a way of avoiding standards and accountability. So I've talked about two I's. The first one was irrelevant criticism. The second one was inconsistent. And then the third one is interest. And when I talk about interest, what I mean is that the criticism is one that collects interest over time. So they won't say anything or they won't bring up the issue, and time passes. And then all of a sudden, boom, all these things that they could have and should have addressed are weaponized against you with some sort of immediate and usually unfair action. Okay. This does tend to happen within occupational settings that use the high control way of relating to people. And so many of you have talked to me, in the comment section or whatever about how you were summoned and were told about all these things that, happened way back when. And now they're upset. And basically, you're either put on like a performance plan or told basically that you got to leave, right? And so even though that's not fair, the way that people will do this is by making excuses. So you may say something, well, hey, if you had, and this is, I also want to preface this by saying this doesn't always happen within work environments. This can happen in friendships and with families where there's this laundry list of stuff that could have been addressed very quickly and very easily. By choosing not to disclose it at that time, it gives them time to, formulate their action. It's sort of like if you think about, crime movies or like, stories and things like that, they may choose not to arrest somebody because they want that person to lead them to the bigger fish. They want a whole list of rules that have been broken or laws that have been broken, rather, to now throw the book at this person or group of people. And that's from the perspective of like criminal justice, right? But when we think about high control relational systems, it's also used the same way. So you could say, well, hey, how come this wasn't brought up? Well, we thought that we just let you figure it out on your own. We figured out it was just a little mistake, or they might even try to make themselves a victim and say, oh, I've been so tired and I just have so much to do and I can't, document, every single thing that everybody does all the time and, blah, 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 and kind of make themselves like the martyr or the victim in that case. Remember Darvo, RVO, reverse victim and offender, right? And so these are the sorts of things that you see. And I would say that this whole thing of a criticism collecting interest, it's very destabilizing because some people may think, okay, hey, they're in there for like either a professional meeting or personal meeting, and then they're overwhelmed by all these things or struggling to remember it. Remember too that as time passes with things, it is more difficult to have an accurate account of what happened. And because they're not bringing these things up with you, or they're bringing it up in a way that's not clear or professional or direct, then it's vague. That's where, again, the plausible deniability comes in. Somebody, if you think about it from like a relational standpoint, the person could say, well, gosh, couldn't you tell I was hurt by that? Or couldn't you tell I didn't like that? Or, I said something, or whatever it is. Or didn't you see how upset my face looked? Right? Things like that. So, again, think about the functions of these sorts of behaviors. They're destabilizing. And when they're destabilizing, when there are unclear, conflicting standards, the person on the receiving end of that is more easily controlled. Now that you have language and clarity and hopefully some, tools and a framework to understand everything, then now the next steps will be yours to take. Have a peaceful day. Bye-bye.